Can I first of all thank everybody for joining us this afternoon for what we hope will be a really inspiring and stimulating, thought-provoking session in what is the first of 3 webinars where we are looking at sharing good practice between mainstream and special schools. The West Midlands team from Whole School Send are joined today by 2 colleagues from the Shaw Education Trust, which is a multi-academy trust which covers all sectors and all phases. And the 2 colleagues who are joining us are Mr. Philip Harrison, who is the National Director, one of the National Directors of Education, and Mrs. Berni Pearce, who is the Deputy Director of the Shaw Trust's Institute of Education. Thank you very much for being with us, Berni and Phil. I'll hand things over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Al, and welcome everybody to this afternoon session. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I hope you find it useful. We'll try and address any questions or comments at the end, but if there's anything burning as we go through, we can try and sort that for you as we go along. So I'll just try and advance the slide. So I think we've pretty much done that. So we're hoping to demonstrate what we do between our specialist provisions and our mainstream provisions across the trust. So like I say, I hope that's useful. This is just in terms of the purpose of Whole School Send and what the Whole School Send organisation aims to do. So I'll just give you a second to just flick through that, but I'm sure everyone's really aware of the great work that goes on across the country by some of our wonderful colleagues. So I'm Phil Harrison, as Al said. I joined Shaw Education Trust at the end of 2016 after a stint of time at Ofsted as one of Her Majesty's inspectors, and I led some of their work around special educational needs. I continued to inspect for a little bit whilst I joined Shaw Education Trust, but I no longer do that, so none of my views represent Ofsted, just to make that clear. And prior to joining Ofsted, I was a head teacher of special schools and colleges in a few areas of the country, and I was very privileged to do so. Before that, I tried my hand at teaching in those schools as well, and it seemed to go okay, so I continued to do so. So we're hoping to talk to you about why we created Shaw Education Trust in the first place, and it's really important to us that we get across to you the culture of the way that we work, because that underpins the systems and structures which allow hopefully young people with special educational needs to thrive. We want to celebrate with you the positive impact that some of our work has had on the young people, and essentially, like I say, to make sure that we shout about those really good things. So I wanted to explain to you where Shaw Education Trust comes from, because it's relatively unique in the school sector, in the sense that we are a multi-academy trust, but we're actually sponsored by a third sector charity called the Shaw Trust. And the Shaw Trust is aimed at supporting disadvantaged and disabled people of all ages to thrive in their lives. So the Shaw Trust, as a sponsor charity, got into a conversation with the Department for Education and some schools in Staffordshire, and decided to form a very small, at that time, multi-academy trust group. And that was originally born around 3 specialist provisions. And I think that's quite important in terms of the history of the trust. That it was born out of doing well for those young people in those schools. So only around 350 pupils at that time, and only a few staff, but we've grown significantly, and we've purposely grown to be cross-phase and cross-sector. So in terms of strategic intent, from the very start of the trust, it was about all young people being successful. So I just want to share with you one of the statements that we're very proud and very clear about. So I will take the liberty of reading it out. So we believe that all children should have the opportunity to be successful, whatever their starting point. We pledge an unswerving commitment to improve, accelerate and enable ambitious life goals for all young people in our academies. And I'll try and unpick how we walk that talk over the course of the next few slides in terms of the measurement of success that we have for all of our young people, and how we go about celebrating the wonderful things that they achieve across all of the different settings where we provide education. So I'm just going to finish off that sort of introductory bit in terms of our values related to that statement. So these 5 things are absolutely fundamental to everything that we do. So first and foremost, we're focused on the people within our organisation. So I'm going to show you in a little while just the statistics around the kind of people that we work with. So everything we do should be aimed at ensuring those people thrive within the organisation in which they either work or receive their education, and indeed thrive once they've left us to go on to the next stage of their education, employment or training or care. So we also aim to act with integrity, so we want to work in the realms of the truth, and that's really important for us when working with really complex young people, and how we reveal the challenges between all agencies and parents, etc. We just want people to work from a really clear baseline as to what the next stages are for success. We want to be innovative, so I'm going to talk to you in a minute about a really exciting project that we undertook a few years ago to set up an independent specialist college, which was a challenge, but was a real success, and has demonstrated some really amazing outcomes for some very complex young people. We aim to be best in class, and we unashamedly want to set up a system where people across the organisation are accountable for the work that they do, and we know that if everybody does their bit, including agencies that we work with, and we really subscribe to the spirit of the code of practice. We want everybody within the system to be accountable for their bit of the jigsaw, and we know that if all those things come together, then children with special educational needs will have the best possible opportunity to thrive and have happy and successful lives. So what does SHORE Education Trust look like now? So we've got 9 specialist provisions. We've got a small primary pupil referral unit. We've got our independent specialist college, which is the 16 to 25 provision, 9 mainstream secondary schools and 6 mainstream primary schools. And the reason I share that with you is that is absolutely by design. So we wanted a cross-phase and cross-sector multi-academy trust because we wanted to represent what society is really like. So we cater for children with life-limiting conditions, with profound and multiple learning difficulties, to young people who have autism as their primary need, to children who are applying to red brick universities across the country, and a plethora of children in between those aspects of those children's lives. So it's by design, and we therefore respect and value each bit of the organisation in that way. And I think, like I say, I wanted to emphasise that that's really helps clearly the mainstream and special links in order to benefit children. So I'm just going to exemplify that with 4 examples of schools that we work with. So Saxon Hill Academy in Lichfield, so that's a 2 to 19 special school. It's located only a couple of miles away from one of our mainstream primary schools. So they've worked really well together in terms of early years provision and some operational functions of the school, and the leaders work together in order to meet the needs of children through different staffing models, etc. So that works really well for us down in Lichfield. Fortis Academy is our largest mainstream secondary school that's got a 6th form as well. So Fortis geographically is right in the south of where we kind of operate, but they've got a really good relationship with one of our new specialist provisions, or relatively new specialist provisions, which is a school for children with social, emotional, mental health difficulties. That's not too far away from them, so they've been working on alternative provision developments in Fortis Academy, whilst supporting the specialist provision with curriculum developments around mathematics and outdoor learning, and some of the really great stuff that Fortis have got going on because of the size and because of their capacity and their the number of staff they've got. They're able to help out with the development of the specialist provision. Then we've got an example of one of our primary mainstream schools, so Kidsgrove Primary School. So we're really proud of the direction of travel of Kidsgrove Primary School. In fact, they've been part of a DFE piece of work today, where we've had 600 DFE employees looking at the work of SEND within that primary school. So they've done some really cool work around the development of reading for children with special educational needs. And that's going to be highlighted hopefully as a model of really strong practice that we can share. That's a school that was historically, or is still technically in special measures, but will hopefully it will get a stronger judgment than that when Ofsted revisit, but they're really generous in terms of what they've learnt in terms of using digital technology, and that's had an impact on some of our specialist work. In fact, I know that the head teacher's currently speaking to one of our special school head teachers about exactly that as we speak now. And then finally, just Newfriars College. So that was formerly the further education department of Blackfriars Academy in Newcastle under Lyme. You may be aware that some of the rules changed around how adult provision was commissioned across the country, and we spent a lot of time and energy forming the new college, and we've got some really exciting projects going on there, including a really successful project search provision at Royal Stoke Hospital, where we've had a real success in terms of getting young people employment. So what Newfriars has done for our multi-academy trust is really to demonstrate some really successful life outcomes for some children with a real complexity of need, and that's really helped our mainstream schools to have the aspiration for some of their young people that they've struggled to either engage in education, or they might have struggled to provide really aspirational work for the young people. So we've actually got the role models, and we've been able to share that with the schools to say, look what can be achieved, and it's been, like I say, been really successful. So in terms of, just wanted to share with you the sort of proportions of children across the trust. So you'll see sort of to the bottom right-hand side of the slide, there's some statistics around how many children with special educational needs we've got across the trust. So nearly 11,000 pupils, and just under a sort of quarter of them have some level of defined special educational need, and therefore it's a real priority for us as a trust that we make sure that we've got the correct CPD in place, the right networks in place, and the right quality assurance mechanisms in place to make sure that those young people thrive across each of their settings. So finally, I just wanted to make a sort of strategic point on that really, and it was one where, in terms of the formation of the trust, we've been concerned that small specialist provision might be at risk in the future in terms of how things are funded, in terms of the funding pots through the high needs block, in terms of local authority capacity, etc. So not only do children get a better deal by forming a group which shares values and vision and an equity across all those young people, but those young people thrive because they work within a system that has the money and the capacity to be able to do those things. So by working with mainstream secondary schools and larger mainstream primary schools and larger specialist schools, it gives the revenue within all that to enable us to have the capacity to do the things that we do, which has really been sort of strategically quite or it is a good thing that we've done in order to do that. Just wanted to share with you that we're very pleased to have won the opportunity to open a brand new free school as well. So in September 23, we'll be getting the keys to a school for 80 children with autism that will open in Bury. And just to say, in terms of the spirit of the conversation that we're in now, that's going to be co-located with one of our mainstream secondary provisions, Unsworth Academy. So we'll be able to run a special school and mainstream secondary school on exactly the same campus, and we're going to do some really cool things around the leadership of all that in order to make sure that all those young people get access to the very best facilities and the highest quality teaching and provision that we can possibly provide, and it's a really exciting project, so please keep your eyes out for what we do there. So I'm just going to labour this slide a little bit and exemplify some of these things that we do which help us to cross sectors, and I'll just pick these out and just talk to you about talk to you about what we do. So in terms of sharing Ofsted expertise, we've been strategic in who we've employed in the trust. So we've got 5 former Her Majesty's inspectors from Ofsted. We've currently got 4 of the central team who continue to inspect, and all those people inspect in different sectors and have got experience of inspecting in different sectors. So we make sure that they've got the contemporary knowledge that's given from their training from Ofsted, and we use that to spray it across the schools. So for example, we've got a lead inspector, a trained lead inspector for primary mainstream education, and she goes to work with some of our special schools in terms of things like early reading. Vice versa, we've got really skilled lead inspectors of a mainstream secondary experience who are really skilled in being able to look at different curriculum models in our specialist provisions, and they're able to go and support and give a different perspective than just a sector view. So in terms of equity at senior executive level, this is really key in terms of the culture in which we work. So throughout each iteration of the growth of the trust, we've made sure that we've had both mainstream and specialist representative at the highest level of the executive team in the trust. So there will always be someone with a voice saying, how do we shape things in terms of school improvement and provision for all the young people? And like I say, that goes from people who are applying to red brick universities to those who are have attainment levels and may have a label of profound and multiple learning difficulty. Another cultural aspect is around the equity of our head teachers. So we were really keen to create a culture where there wasn't a sense that if somebody ran the biggest school with the most number of pupils, that they had the loudest voice. So we've purposely engineered and created a culture where everybody has equity in terms of those head teacher opportunities. So we get together with our head teachers or principals on a regular basis. In fact, we're meeting with them tomorrow, and all those people will get an equal opportunity to share their views about the work that we do and shape the strategic direction of the trust. In terms of equity of discussion at governance levels, we're really pleased, and again purposefully we've gone out to find appropriate people at governance level. So we've got a former national director of Ofsted with a mainstream background who's part of our board of trustees, and he's part of the Education Standards Committee. We've also got the CEO of NASON as part of our board of trustees, and we've also got a former special school head teacher and the chair of the National SEND Forum as the chair of our board, chair of the Board of Education Standards. So again, the emphasis in terms of being held to account throughout the organisation are about all people, all young people, and the great things that they do. In terms of the culture around equity of pupils, we would state quite categorically that all of those 11,000 pupils have an absolute equity across the trust. So each of their individual achievements has the same value, and that's something that we live and breathe every day, and that helps to create the culture in which head teachers and their senior teams can reflect that in their day-to-day work. In terms of bespoke support, we're very keen that we don't have a rigidly defined model of schools getting a certain number of days of support or a particular type of support or challenge at a particular point throughout the year. So where our schools flag up, or we flag up points of improvement around anything to do with school improvement, but for the purposes of this discussion around special educational needs, then we're quick to react to ensure that that support is put in place. So Bernie will talk in a minute about the Institute of Education and how that responds to those kind of activities. But we've got a cadre of support and people and courses that we can commission into in order to support our schools to support those children with special educational needs. The leadership of SEND and the networks, just to say in terms of culture as well, we're really keen that our people network within their local areas. So our geography is quite wide. We go from Wigan and Bury and Greater Manchester over to Merseyside, through to Derby, Staffordshire, Stoke, Wolverhampton and Birmingham. But we're really keen that our leaders are involved in special educational needs networks in their locality, because we know each local offer is very different, and we make sure that people have the time and space to engage with those local networks in order to shape their schools strategically and to know what's being commissioned where and when, and how they can support the local offer, and at times where they can challenge the local offer in order to get the best for our young people. In terms of bespoke staffing structures and contracts to meet pupil needs, my point there really is that we haven't got a set way of creating a staffing structure to meet the needs of children with special educational needs. So we allow the principals the flexibility to design a staffing structure that best meets the cohort of children in front of them. So if, for example, a head teacher wants to innovate and create a new post which would benefit young people, so that might be looking at how a school approaches their EHCP processes, or it might be about how they run their interventions, then we're really keen to support our schools to develop those jobs, develop those job descriptions, develop the parameters of that, and to support them to put that in place so that it's really responsive to meeting the population of children that are in front of people at that time. Some work around primary and secondary transition has been, as you can imagine, really powerful. So in terms of expectations of how primary expectations through into secondary, and that works both in specialist and mainstream sector, really crossing over all that expertise to allow people to understand how well children can achieve and how well they can be supported in different environments. Sharing through reviews is around using the expertise across the trust. So latterly, we've been asking head teachers and senior colleagues to join us for what we deem to be called health checks. So they're like looking at curriculum in schools, looking at the quality of teaching, looking at behaviour and attitudes, etc., etc. And we utilise the skills of our senior colleagues across the trust to come and support central team colleagues to share their expertise around young people. So that works within sectors, so specialist school head teachers might support others, but it also works across sectors as well. So we might have in fact last week we had two mainstream colleagues join in a review of a specialist provision to support with taking views and supporting school improvement on curriculum design in a few curriculum areas. No centrally defined curriculum model is really, it is what it says on the tin. So we hold head teachers to account for the curriculum that they put in place, but again, that allows them the flexibility to meet the needs of the young people in front of them. So we're not going to head teachers and saying, why is this child not accessing this many hours of that, or why are they not following that particular programme of that? It's about holding to account the head teacher's decisions for the provision that they put in place and making sure that, like I say, they can be responsive. And then finally, we do quite a lot of work in terms of supporting local authorities and clinical commissioning groups with their strategy. So we're really keen to pool the expertise and the intelligence of the areas in which we work. And as a central team, we're able to work with key SEND leaders in the areas that in which we have schools to support them to develop strategies around meeting the needs of children with special educational needs. So most acutely, currently, and the best example of that is we've done some really great work with Derby City Council and the local CCG to develop approaches to joint commissioning and working with parent carer forums, for example, and this all trickles down and benefits our young people. So I'm just going to finish with this slide and then an image before I pass over to Berni, but I just wanted to distill all that information into a big three, really. So I think the key bits for me in terms of the high level strategy around the work that we do across mainstream and special school is around creating a culture of equity for all pupils. Not that children with special educational needs have more special or are seen as more special, or children who are going to universities are seen as different and elite. It's about all pupils having that absolute equity across the work that we do. I think by creating that culture of professional respect across all of our schools has really aided those relationships across mainstream and specialist provision, and in fact between primary and secondary mainstream provision as well. And I would add around that sort of trying to instill those professional behaviours around that professional respect with other agencies, particularly with children with special educational needs. So how we interact with social care colleagues and health colleagues, and how we help to improve the system, and how we are professionally generous in terms of what we do, rather than looking at just our bit of the jigsaw being okay. It's too important to not get that right. And then finally, just around bespoke interventions for school improvement. So it's that right place, right time, right person, and being able to quickly mobilise in order to support schools to do the very best they can for those young people. And then I'm going to finish my presentation with an image of our Key Stage 3 celebration. So this is a proportion of children from our secondary schools, both special schools and mainstream schools. And pre-COVID, we bring them all together at Keele Hall, Keele University, and we get them all kitted up in their graduation outfits and get them up on the stage and present them with their awards of achievement. So it's those young people who have achieved the best within at the end of Key Stage 3 in each of those schools. And I think that image really exemplifies perfectly what we're about and the culture in which we work. So I appreciate that's you know, a very sort of high level view of the kinds of work that we do, but I think by creating those systems and structures and that culture, it really benefits young people really well. And Bernie's now going to exemplify that through some of the work that she's going to describe that we do. Over to you, Bernie. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Phil, and a warm welcome to colleagues who are attending this session this evening. As you can see, my name's Berni Pearce and I am the Deputy Director of the Institute of Education for PSHE Education Trust. My previous role, so this time last year, I was Director of Blackfriars Teaching School, and you will be fully aware that Alison Parr is the principal of that school. We were very proud as a teaching school that everything we offered really was designed, planned, developed and delivered inclusively. So often our courses were attended by mainstream primary, secondary, specialist provisions as well, special schools, FE, etc. And we were very proud that those training opportunities with colleagues from across phase and cross sector brought about a real richness of discussion and very much high quality conversations on how we could support all of our learners and our learners with SEND as well. This year my role is Deputy Director of the Institute of Education, and that role really has continued. I work with not only our trust schools, but I work with schools who don't sit within our trust with regards to English, teaching and learning, pupil premium, so I'm a pupil premium reviewer and a SEND reviewer. I also lead on the early career framework and the NPQs. So that's my new role, but it's very much about actually how we work in partnership across those sectors to get the very best outcomes for the young people that we teach within our settings. So when Alison asked me today to share some sort of practical examples of the work that we've done as a trust, it was you know, with great interest that I wanted to be involved, to share with you what has been the result of those really strong partnerships between special settings and mainstream settings. So around 3 years ago, when we as schools started to really look at and revisit our curriculum and to talk about the redesign of our curriculum, we came together as sectors, cross-phase, to talk about what our curriculum would look like, what our curriculum intent was, and what we wanted our curriculums to look like within our different settings. We had very frank and open conversations about what we were going to deliver, why we were going to deliver it, when we were going to deliver it, and how that was going to be very much applicable to our pupils' needs and our contexts. We wanted to really develop ambitious curriculums for all, and certainly those conversations with our special schools where they were talking about, so what are you doing in your mainstream setting? We could do that in our settings too. What we had was those rich conversations about how to create ambitious but adaptable curriculums. And what was phenomenal to see was when we went into our mainstream schools in Year 7, we would often see Oliver Twist being taught, and then we would go into our special setting and see Oliver Twist being taught with some adaptations. There was real common language when we were discussing the curriculum. We talked about fair access, we talked about scaffolding techniques, we talked about range of resources that we could use and share across our settings. We talked about the deployment of other adults within those different contexts. We could see from those discussions how our curriculum would develop not only from early years but all the way up to FE. From those discussions looking at curriculum, we then started to discuss what accreditations and qualifications we were offering our pupils in our different settings. We shared what we were currently offering, and there was a plethora of accreditations available in those different settings, but actually schools wanted to go away and research even further. And in those meetings, what we then did is we discussed the findings of that research. I'm really proud to say now that when we go into our mainstream and our specialist provisions, what we are seeing is a range of qualifications, for example, in English, that link to entry level, step up to English, silver and gold. We've got functional skills, we've got GCSEs, we've got NCFE qualifications that are vocational but very work related. We've got A levels, etc., etc. And what we're finding is that those discussions about the qualifications that are being delivered and the breadth of opportunity means that it's very inclusive, personalised, student-centred and very ambitious for the outcomes of all of our learners. Such similarities with regards to what we're delivering meant that we could offer standardisation and moderation sessions in those network meetings. So colleagues would bring a range of pupils' work, and they would be able to discuss not only the assessment side of it, but the quality of what was being delivered, and were then able to go back and share that practice with teachers in their own settings and across settings. What I would say to you is those networking opportunities went beyond just the hub meetings that we had. Actually, there were visits to schools, there were telephone conversations, there were emails. The learning that was happening in those network meetings was infectious. It was appreciated from across sectors, it was supportive, it was often questioned, it was built upon, and we very much felt that the conversations and the development that was going on in the individual schools as a result of those agenda items, that level of research, that level of conversation, that level of shared practice was indeed impacting on the outcomes of our learners. We then started to look at individual things, so interventions, and one of the intervention strategies we looked at is how we supported that early reading, and Phil's just talked about this in one of our primary schools that's been sharing with the DFE today. And we had conversations about, so what interventions are in place in our mainstream settings, how are they working, what impact are they having, what are the processes, can we share practice, is there any shared CPD opportunities that colleagues can engage in? And one of the things we looked at in particular was reading, and presentations from different colleagues on the interventions they were using included the work they were doing with Read Writer Inc, Lexia, Lexia Power, Fresh Start for older pupils, Switch On, that lent itself to precision teaching, cued articulation. And what we found from those sessions was there was a multitude of interventions taking place to support reading. And what we were able to do is ask those colleagues who were part of our family of schools how this was working in their setting, what impact it was having, what were the pitfalls, what were the costs to those different interventions. And those discussions were had during that meeting and beyond that meeting, so that colleagues could make a decision on whether the interventions they were going to choose for their own setting were right. Okay, so next slide, please. So as an Institute of Education, we continue to offer these networking hubs, and I'll share just some of them that we've delivered this year. So why are they so important? I think from what I've said and from what Phil said, our practice is in schools. And as John Donne says, no man is an island, no school is an island. And actually what we found is by working together and broadening that lens, we can really find out what's right for the pupils in our context as well. So that networking has enabled us to discuss and to ask detailed questions, to sometimes challenge the opinions of others, but to share that best practice that will inform what we do in our own school to support our different learners and their different needs. Next slide, please. So these are just some of our hubs that we're offering out to other schools. So we've got our early years hub, we've got our year 6 hub, we've got a teaching and learning hub that I deliver, we've got a PSHE hub, we've got our Senko hub and our design and technology hub. And I just want to give you on the following slides a little bit of insight into what we cover in those hubs, and use some time really to consider how working across phase would really, and across sector, would really inform the work that you're doing in your own school. So we can see all of the work that's happening in early years and how we are adapting what we deliver to our pupils in different sectors, how we can use that outdoor provision to support our different learners, speech and language, working with those external providers, signposting parents, and supporting them in supporting their child in the home. Teaching and learning, you can see some of the things that we covered there. So how to support disadvantaged pupils in your setting. What we also look at when we have those discussions is we're looking at how schools are using their pupil premium grant, but also how they're supporting disadvantaged pupils who are also learners with SEND, and the strategies that they're using to maximise the outcomes for those learners. We've also looked at policy writing. We've considered how policies that we present on our website, whether it's our SEND policy, whether it's our SEND information report, how that takes into consideration the voice of our parents, how we ensure that it is user-friendly, and how it enlightens those parents on what the quality provision is that we offer for our learners with SEND. Next slide, please, Phil. So you can see our Senko Hub as well. We've had some phenomenal discussions around girls and autism, and the support that we've shared across sectors has been so valuable. The strategies we've used in supporting the girls, the provision mapping, the tools that we use for provision mapping in our special settings, in our mainstream settings, some of the programs we use, whether that's EduKey or otherwise, and how those are being utilised in our different schools. Hopefully, from what I've shared with you and what Phil shared with you this evening, you've gained an idea of how that cross-sector and cross-phase working does enrich us all as individuals. It really does impact on what we do within our own settings to support our different learners, and really I think we would all agree that's what we do it for. So hopefully that's given you some insight and some practical ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We don't have any questions on the chat, but I don't know whether anybody wants to raise a hand or add a question now, if there's anything that they want to ask.
Can I ask a question?
Please do, Conrad.
Yeah, I'm really interested. Thank you in the presentation, and particularly around how you've approached trying to work with external agencies, particularly local authorities, CCGs, developing clinical provision. Just wondering how you deal with those challenges across your schools. We do know there are significant challenges on the system, particularly around referrals and assessment time for referrals. Have you built in any of that within your trust, any support, or have you gone for the sort of co-production local authority model?
Thanks, Conrad. So yeah, what we've tried to do is create capacity in the centre to take some of that pain away from our head teachers. So we're obviously encourage our head teachers to engage in any local systems and forums and head teacher groups, etc. But equally, we know that sometimes they get a bit stuck or frustrated with those conversations. So that's why we've created the capacity to support them with that. So we go out of our way to engage with local authorities, and our spirit is to do that from round the table rather than in a kind of confrontational kind of way. So we sit on various strategic send boards, and we attend meetings that we've suggested that that local authorities should set up, etc. So I chair one of the send strategic boards in one of the areas that we work, which is really nice to be able to sort of direct some of that kind of stuff. But I suppose essentially the strategic answer is, it's really important to us that the system works for young people, and it's not just about our schools getting an Ofsted badge, it's about the system working for children, and therefore strategically we've created the capacity to try our best to support that, whilst recognising, and we would say as our multi-academy trust view is, there's not enough resource in the system, and we should make that clear to everybody, but we recognise that just has to keep going up the food chain, and making sure that in essence the code of practice is resourced in the way that it should have been. So one of my favourite phrases of all time is, like, the code of practice was really good, but somebody should have walked down the road to tell the Treasury it was happening, so that it actually could have the resource there. So yeah, I hope that sort of broadly answers your question. Clearly there are key tension points. So we've got issues around how nursing is provided in one area, special school nursing is provided in one area, and that's quite a tense debate at the moment, but that's why we have lawyers as well to support our schools, and hopefully they don't feel they're on their own in terms of that argument. Is that okay? Thank
you. We've got a question from Rachel, who's wondering about whether students can move between settings on a full-time or a part-time basis.
Yeah, so we've got some examples of that but within the sector. So we haven't got examples of children moving from mainstream to special or special to mainstream, but we have got a few examples of where children have moved between mainstream settings in order to support their learning or their life at that moment in time. So we've got a scenario like that happening at the moment, for example, of a child with a particular set of needs where he just needs a bit of support and he needs it in a different way. So that's co-produced with parents and the local authority in order to enable that to happen, to get a better outcome. So yeah, I think one of the things that I've observed when I was inspecting was around some concerns that special schools might become I want to use a better phrase than dumping grounds, but that is in essence what people were saying. They were worried that special schools within a multi-academy trust would end up taking more pupils from the multi-academy trust than they needed to, and just to say that that isn't what we do. It's about putting the support into the provision and trying to support them to do the best for the child, but accepting that not every child can have their needs met in every setting, and then it's supporting schools to be able to go back to commissioners to say we can be successful if we put this in place, or the provision looks like X or Y, and just coaching and helping our head teachers and Senkos with those kinds of dialogues, really.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Has anybody else got any other questions? Okay. Oh. Okay, so can I end by first of all thanking Phil? I think your diagram on crossing sectors, Phil, provides a route map for anybody who is operating at that higher level and would like to set up an organisation where you're bringing together both mainstream and special, because that's a really superb resource. And thank you, Berni, for your examples, because you gave plenty of really practical examples of what this can look like in schools. Can I thank you both and thank everybody for attending? Francesca's asked us all to help to improve future events by completing the survey, and I hope you all have a good rest of the evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.